Det kommer neste år. Jeg har mange pakker jeg må levere. Jeg kommer tilbake neste år.
Ja, alle hvor vi har vært en sånn, det drøpte ned på meg.
Er fin? Den er fin. Jeg kommer til å savne deg. Det er mange som venter på pakkene sine. En dag i året. Et år til.
Ja, det var kommet noen pakker til deg. God jul!
Jeg fikk tak i litt assistanse i år, så jeg kan være sammen med deg.
Welcome, Solomon.
Thank you so very much, and I thank you for the opportunity, brothers and sisters, for us to share and discuss on this subject of a think tank. I thought that we should have a look at that video, and I'm sure that all of us watched it. The subject matter is about elevated thinking. And that's a classic example that if we look at the scriptures, the way that Luke in chapter 16, from verses 8 to 9, the story of the crooked manager. I'd like to read it so that I'd like to read it out so it will give us context. Because there's something interesting that the brother who presented earlier now talked about. He said that he says what we are doing is not going to be very unique. I want to think that I will disagree with that. The reason is because if we don't see that what we are doing is unique, then the question will be, why are we doing it at all? If it is what everybody is doing. The thinking about Christ is unique thinking. Jesus Christ himself is an innovation in and of himself, because what Jesus came to do was a redefinition of meaning. And that is how people begin to think differently. The video we have just watched is a redefinition of marriage. It is a redefinition of love. The postal service of Norway has now created messaging where a man who has a family falls in love with Santa, and at the end of the day, you saw that it ended with Santa and the guy having a kiss. What happened there was because somebody redefined love. And the whole world begins to see love from that point of view. Not from the point of view that Christ will see it from, which is agape, but from the point of view of eros. So the thinking there is that a man or anybody can decide that they can have erotic love and erotic relationship with whatever sex or gender that they like. And that is what is pushed out, and that is what now becomes the pervasive thinking. Let me read Luke chapter 16, verses 8 to 9. From the Message version. He said, now here is a surprise. The master praised the crooked manager. And why did he praise the crooked manager? He said, because he knew how to look after himself. Streetwise people are smarter in this regard than law-abiding citizens. That is the people who are righteous, the people who are doing right. You see, these streetwise people are on constant alert, looking for angles, surviving by their wits. And then he prescribes, I want you to be smart in the same way. But your smartness should be about what is right. Using every adversity to stimulate you to creative survival. That word is crucial, creative survival. To concentrate your attention on the bare essentials so that you will live, really live. Please listen to the last sentence. And not complacently get by on good behavior. Just mere good behavior will not get us anywhere. We are supposed to employ critical thinking, elevated thinking. And what is elevated or superior thinking? Elevated or superior thinking is the thinking or the thought that directs the actions that elevate the mind of Christ in the principles and practice of whatever we do, the principles and practice of whatever enterprise. This is why it is called Mount Zion thinking, because it is elevated thinking. Mount Zion is the highest elevation in Jerusalem. So thinking that is coming from the church, thinking that is coming from the mind of Christ, the thinking that is and it should pervade the practices and the principles of whatever we do. That is the only way in which we can make Christ the king. Whether it is in marketing, whether it is in banking, whether it is in medicine, whether it is in media. The example that we have just seen is that the gay agenda has decided to push their agenda into Christmas. So the postal service has just created this ad for it to be seen as facilitating love between people and among people. This is a new thing, but it is evil. So the story of the crooked manager is that we also, like this crooked manager, should understand how to bring creativity into designing the ways that messaging, the content of message, that it should now direct the way that society thinks. This is what it is. So it has to be something that is unique. So that's the first thing that I will say. And if we look at our problem statement, therefore, when we are looking at what is required as we have limited skills or unemployment or social challenges, if the first skill we need are the skills that we normally call what we say are resume skills. I want to distinguish between resume skills. Resume skills are the skills that you have on your resume. You went to Makerere, you went to Harvard, you had a BSc, you had a first class and all that. Those are resume skills. All of the world has that. But there is something that is additional, which is what differentiates. That is what makes the Christian unique. That is what makes the thought superior. That is what makes it enlightened. That is what makes it higher. Those are what you call we have the resume skills. Those are the ones that you call the eulogy skills. A eulogy is what is said about a person. You know that when a person dies, it's all about how nice the person was. The person never missed church. The person always gave to the poor and all of that. Those are not skills that are usually in the resume. Those are the skills that make a person a human being made in the image and likeness of God. That is what will make inspire or whatever comes from the think tank. That which brings life rather than death. All of these skills that do not have anything that does not have, or thinking that does not have Christ in it, is going to bring death. Isaiah chapter 58, I'm going to round up now and then I will leave room for the discussion. Isaiah chapter 58 talks about advocacy essentially, because the first thing he says, lift up your voice like a trumpet and tell my people. When you are lifting up your voice, you are broadcasting. What is going on in this video that you are seeing is the practical example of lift up your voice. They are lifting up their voice. They are pushing their values. And in verse 12, it says something interesting. Let me read it. It says, those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. And critically, you shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. What is a breach? A breach is something that is broken in a wall. What is happening is that you have society that is broken. So the first thing in coming up with your problem statement is, what is it that is broken? That is what needs to be fixed. So in marketing communications, what happens is that you have products and services that are bad, but advertising will present these products with all kinds of appeal. And at the end of the day, some of them, you know them in pharmaceutical companies and all of that. And even what Brother Emmanuel said when he was starting, the whole concept of the narrative. If Africa does not give its own narrative, because it's an African proverb, that until the lion learns to write, the tail of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. The hunter is the one who has control of the media. They have the CNNs and co. They have the Hollywood. They have the issues and all of that they are pushing and projecting. Until we have that, which is based on the higher thinking of Christ, on how human beings should behave and how society should be run, the tale and the narrative will always glorify them. And that is why Africa will always be put down. So that is the job for Inspire Africa to do. And it's going to be inspired because it's going to come from 3 P's. The pain. What is your pain? Which is what makes you design what the statement is or the problem. Then you go into prayer. It is at the place of prayer, because you have empathy with people who are suffering that problem. Then that's where you will get revelation. That is where the inspiration comes. And then you now have perception, which is what actually gives the inspiration for what a solution is. So this is the process. That will be my contribution for now.
Thank you so much, Solomon. We didn't want you to stop. But thank you for sharing your thoughts. Friends, if we can start to have the questions coming. I'm just trying to see if we can get Joy online. Just checking if Joy has joined us, but I know she's traveling. So if we can start the discussions, when Joy comes, you can share her perspective. But very good. So I love the way you emphasize the fact that this has to be unique. We have to do something that is unique to be attractive. There's no product that is not unique that will draw attention unless it's unique. Like you said, we'll be wasting our time. So we want something that is superior, something that is unique. We can use what exists, but it has to be unique, very unique in creating this advocacy. Thank you so much. I like the African proverb as well. Very exciting proverb. And everything is anchored on new concept for me is the new skill, the eulogy skill. I think I need to build that skill. I think all of us have the resume skill. It's time to start to build that new set of skill. Create great insights all through your discussion. Like I said, I didn't want you to stop. I was enjoying just listening to the wisdom. I remember in the last Inspire, we said your name exudes what you are, Solomon, full of wisdom. But thank you so much for those words of wisdom. Can we have some questions, comments? You can put up your hand, I'll pick you, or if you have a question on the comment, I'm constantly checking to see if we have a question coming through in the chat as well. Okay, I'll start. So I think you've painted the kind of pathway for us. We know the urgency of what we need to do. I think where we trip is the execution. How do we execute? And these guys beat us into this game because they are very good in execution. If you look at that video, I mean, they know that everyone is going to be preparing for Christmas, and what a better time to actually position something that will draw attention. So how do we get smart in our execution plans, Solomon? How do we execute? We have these revelations, ideas, as you've articulated through the pain, prayer, revelation, and perception. How do we actually execute? Maybe could you give us some ideas on how you think we can actually execute these thoughts, this truth? We know it's the truth, it's invaluable, it will stand forever. The Bible says that heaven and earth will pass, but my truth, my word will not pass away. We know that this will endure forever. How do we get smart in positioning these truths through the environment where we find ourselves? Some thoughts.
Yes, thank you so very much. It's a good thing you said that people are doing things already. So let us relate what we have just seen in this video with as something that already exists. That's the principle. The principle that they have is designed as something they call NLE. It's a process. What we are doing now is, let's take it from the point of view of, say, maybe at ONLE. So we just pack that. Capital O, capital N, capital L, capital E. So O will be for organize. Are we there? O, organize. That is, find out what is the breach. What is it that is missing? What is broken? Teenage pregnancy, for example. This is what we normally do in business, okay? Research, because you want to find out the reason why. And the way you go about this is research. That's what research does, okay? So you find out what is missing, and then you now ask the question, what is God's ideal order on how the situation should be? We saw that in the prophet Isaiah, for example, when he says that they are going to beat their weapons of warfare into plowshares. What is God's divine order for how it is supposed to run? That's for organize. Then we go to what these people did, the N. N means normalize, which means make it the norm the normative behavior in all of society, which is what you can see that they are doing. So they weave all of this into the narrative of proceeding culture. They do it with fashion. They do it in movies. They do it in the academia. They do it in every sphere. People begin to make products and services that are directed at that lifestyle. So that is a market already, because these are human beings. They have a population. They are real flesh and blood human beings. So they are a market. So people actually consume what these guys produce. So that is, when you are normalizing, you make the practices the norm by infusing your choices into academic theories that direct educational systems. For example, your thinking, your advocacy now becomes what you are pushing with the Department of Theology, for example, in Makerere University. It becomes something that you deliver at lectures. It becomes something you deliver at position papers and all of that, and you begin to have debates and all of those kind of things with this. People who are writing stories and designing TVs and all of that, the people who are creating commercials in advertising, this is what the professionals should be doing. That's what the Apostle Paul meant when he said that you are going to take every thought captive. So you are going to create a theory and philosophy of whatever it is that you are doing, which you will now promote by this means that we are saying. That is how you punish the disobedience, which is their own theory. Their theories and philosophies are disobedience against God. So your own superior theories and philosophies and thoughts that are superior to this will now be promoted. So that way, it now becomes the normative way of thinking rather than this evil way. So in that way, you have now punished that disobedience. So your obedience is now complete. That's the whole subject of 2 Corinthians 10 from 3 to 6. So that is normalization in media, in entertainment, in fashion, in beauty, in sports, in economics, and all of that. What about the next L, which is the next one, which is L, legalize? You will now use your resources to lobby and affect government policy so that they will make your cause legal. It now becomes policy. You push it through the legislature and all of that. This is what all the advocacy is supposed to be about. Contact and liaison. If you have a Christian among the professionals, we push for that person to be voted for. We push for all of these ideas to be part of the manifesto. For example, agriculture. That party is saying from the Lord's Prayer, or what we call the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, which means that every day, every human being made in God's image and likeness, because they biologically need food to survive, we will ensure that our party will ensure food security so that no man goes to sleep without having food to eat. That is the practicalization. So the agric professional will now decide that they are designing strains of grain and all of that, so that you no longer have a season where you do not have where you don't have one particular grain or the other. That is now what it means by putting the Christianity or the thoughts of Jesus Christ into action. I will create movies, in my own case as a media person, which is celebrating the family, the ideal family system and structure, and design it in such a way that it is appealing, that people will want to watch it. I will work entertainment value into it. I will work the production values to the extent that people will celebrate the movie, and it can also win an award. Okay, so In that way, you now have legalization, then endorse. Endorse is that you now engage a narrative that strategically presents and promotes prominent people who practice this chosen way of life that we are talking about. They now become the brand ambassadors. So they become our poster boys. And because of that, the same way that people like to buy a product or service because somebody who they respect and love uses it, that will be the same way that they will want to buy into what we are saying, into the product, into the thinking. Because if this man who is respected thinks this way and this is their lifestyle, then it is what imitating. Then that is the new evangelism, which is the real kingdom evangelism. I don't know, that will be my contribution for now. So it's a process.
Thank you so much for that very clear ONLE is the process. And I think that also guides us not to try and climb the tree from the top. I do believe that the sequence in which you've organized it is the way we should follow. Because sometimes we rush to policies. Who's going to listen to you with your policies if you have not gone through these different levels? So thank you very much for that. I see Professor Made has his hand up. I'll allow Professor Made to unmute himself and ask his question. Professor, I hope you can unmute yourself. Professor from Botswana, Gaborone. Okay, maybe as Professor tries to unmute, there's a question here on the chat. Someone says, how can we as Africa effectively counteract the evil agenda from the West? I think you've answered, you've given us some sequence, but I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that. I think it's creating contrary and narratives, as we said. And the question is, how can we as Africans effectively counteract the evil agendas from the West?
My answer here will be, let me take it from a media point of view. And I'll give it by way of an example. The American way of life is celebrated today, and it is seen as appealing because it has been pushed through movies. The Western used to be popular in those days, the whole concept of the cowboy and all of that. Then after some time, they saw that to be competitive, you have to win at science. And that's where you began to see people saying that they were going to go to the moon, which is to show prowess or scientific prowess. And you see the American lifestyle is being celebrated. You will see the hamburger in all its glorious presentation, despite the fact that it may not be a healthy food. You see the big cars in those days that guzzle fuel and all of that kind of a thing. You see the way that it is presented to be beautiful. At the end of the day, this product has been packaged and an American philosophy was developed, which means that what they say about America is the land of dreams and the land of opportunities, which means anything is possible and freedom, you are free to do whatever it is that you want to do. Africa must first of all articulate the philosophy of what the appeal of Africa is. What is it to be African? People tried to do it in the past. The Kwame Nkrumahs and all of that, JK agrees. I'm proud of my color. Who is not proud of their color is not fit to live and all that. But beyond words, what the world is looking to and what the world will respect is the person who is producing something that is superior, that is of value. So we first of all have to look inwards, within Africa. What is it that is of value, that is unique again, which is what branding is. What is it that is unique about Africa that the West does not have, that they cannot compete. If we celebrate that, then you begin to push it. The West cannot push a safari. Kenya and East Africa has been able to create economic value out of the natural presence of animals in that context. Around it, they develop hotels and lodges. And so we're able to create touristic value out of that. People will go to where they see something that has value that they do not have. That's why they will seek your product or your service. So that's essentially it. There is ecotourism, for example. Ecotourism is just based on the natural bushes. The crocodiles, the millipedes, the caterpillars, and all of those things that we have here. Somebody can push the whole narrative that the honey that comes, this thing is about narrative. You create value and stories around the honey that comes from the marshlands of Uganda. That story, because I'm in advertising practice, that story is what people now begin to, and then you celebrate it. The flowers, Britain celebrates occasions, whether weddings or love or whatever, with a lot of flowers that come out of Kenya every day. The diamond is not necessarily the best stone, but love was created around the diamond, and it was given that perception as something that is a girl's best friend. And that's the value that people now have around that stone today, diamond. So it's about narrative. Creating appeal for what you have and celebrating it to the extent that others want it and you earn value from it.
Fantastic. I think that I couldn't have put it any better, but really taking what we have and telling the story about what we have. You're giving us very many examples. We have two hands. I really want my moderator to enable to unmute Professor Madej, and then we'll come to Jackson. So moderate, co-host, if you can, Joshua, if you can just enable. Professor, you've been unmuted, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, and I really appreciate the, I think the wisdom with which Solomon explains the concept. However, I also like the Mount Zion thinking, superior thinking. But if you analyze and you look at the statistics, you see that churches are closing in Europe. So in essence, what it means is that they are becoming, I think, less and less believers in God. And yet in Africa, we do have churches that are growing. So you'd think that the mind of Christ is obviously in Africa. But why is it that if you then look at development, you realize that the West is much, much more developed than Africa. And yet the thinking and the mind of Christ, from my simple analysis, is in Africa because that's where the church is growing. Just a good example. Recently, we had the issue of COVID-19. That was a problem for everybody. And yet answers were not coming from Africa, they were coming from other parts of the world. So I kind of get confused in terms of, while I agree that the mind of Christ is superior, why is it that those that do other things apart from using the mind of Christ seem to be progressing in terms of technological progress? And finding solutions to world problems. I think let me stop there for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so very much. It's a good thing that I like the idea that, Professor, I like the idea that you have mentioned Europe. If we watch what is going on in the world, especially with COP26 that just ended in Scotland, you will see that the whole quest is the Europe we are talking about and the rest of the world. They are looking for Mount Zion thinking, and they are looking for the mind of Christ. The fact that the church is what it is, and then churches are closing, should make us now begin to first and foremost question and query what church is, or whether the church is actually operating in the mind of Christ. So this conversation, I believe, is not about church from the point of view of denomination and all of that. This conversation is from the point of view of order and creativity and design. That is why we say that design must be a vertical that is taught in church. What is design? We take Herbert Simon's definition, that the processes that you engage in to take a situation from where it is unsatisfactory to a preferred place. Mount Zion thinking will always be superior. It will always be about creativity. It will always be about finding solutions. It will always be about technology. Always. The fact that mainstream church does not understand it doesn't mean, and that is what we should actually be working to solve. So, creativity from the beginning in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God's first call to man, or his first injunction to man, is to subdue the earth. And the practical definition of that, or example of that, or meaning of that, is whatever it is that is going on that is less than how God would have wanted it to be, which is perfect. God has put in man the capacity to turn that thing and make it orderly as God would have wanted it. So the core of church must be about creativity and innovation, which is the radical definition of a new meaning so that you create new value. The church as it is, by the definition you have given, has failed in that duty of understanding its reason for existence. That is the reason why we see what we are seeing. Because all of the issues about production and productivity and all that, why is it then that the world is running away from it and talking about pollution? Why is it that the world is running away about conspicuous consumption and mindless consumerism? The reason is because all of these things have consequences. They do not have the spirit of Christ. And it is directed by, same thing, mindless consumerism and conspicuous consumption, without caring what the effect of that is to man and environment. And that is what has brought the world here today. So the search that the world has now is actually for the mind of Christ and for Mount Zion thinking. That is why Mount Zion thinking will always beat Davos thinking. So the church must go back to thinking the way that Christ will want things to run.
No, brilliant. Prof, I see your hand has gone up. Did you have a follow-up before we go to Jackson Levy?
Yes, I do have a follow-up. So Solomon, does it therefore mean that it's possible to have Mount Zion thinking and the mind of Christ and not be a Christian?
That's not possible. The reason why it is not possible is that if you have the mind of Christ, it's contradictory to have the mind of Christ and not be a Christian. That you have the mind of Christ means that you are a Christian. So, for example, food security. Jesus Christ will want for the world to have food security. We talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Isn't that what Jesus was talking about in Matthew chapter 6? When he said that you worry about what you will eat, what you will drink, where you will sleep. And he was talking about housing and agriculture and all of that. He said that the Lord knows that you have need of those things. He said that these things are needed, they are necessary. But the point is that when you pursue them in and of themselves, that is paganism. He says, after these things do the pagans seek. But seek you first his kingdom and his righteousness. What is his kingdom? Where he's thinking is the one that directs everything. Then in that situation, he is the king over that sphere. So your principles and theories and philosophies of economics should be about elevating man, should be about curing poverty, should be about how to help people produce. And in that way, you are godly. That is the righteousness. So righteousness is no longer a fuzzy word that we are attaining to in our heads. It becomes practical action, which is doing right by how God will want it. Because God wants for people to eat properly. He wants for people to eat well. A dietitian, a Christian who is a dietitian, should be working at how to promote, by way of what we are doing now, healthy eating to reverse diabetes. Because big pharmaceutical, or what we call big pharma, is only concerned about how they are making medicines. Look at the whole concept of vaccine appetite that we are seeing. I think there's a country, I don't know if it's Botswana or so, I think, I don't know, who paid some amount of money for 500,000 doses. It has not been supplied to them. Why? So the whole thing about any Christian, the whole purpose of Christianity for a Christian virologist is to design a cure for COVID-19. That's what makes you a Christian virologist, because that is the problem and the issue of your context. So there's no way we can go away from creativity. That's the meaning of subdue the earth. That's what it means to create rivers in the desert practically. It's about creativity and innovation and design as solutioning to the issues of man and the earth.
Fantastic. Thank you, Prof. And I hope you've gotten the answers. And I think the other thing, Solomon, is the dominant nature of those who actually control these systems also prevents. So because we've seen in some within the continent, people who have said, I have a cure for this. They quickly squash that because you're going to kill the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, if you produce that. So they will quickly suppress you and tell you how you've not done clinical trials and all that, because they control these systems anyway.
They control the narrative.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea. So who is the one that determines? You must begin to create. Superior thinking means you will create your parameters for appraisal and for judgment of what goes or what doesn't go. Until you have that, the one whose voice is predominant is the one who is going to win. That's it.
I like that summary. Let's hear from Jackson Levy. If the host can just unmute or make him a co-host. Jackson Levy Wandera, you still have a question, or your question was answered? If you can just enable him. Joshua, are you able to make Jackson co-host and unmute? Joshua, are you with us?
Yes, I've been unmuted.
All right, so carry on, Jackson, with your question.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Manuel and Solomon, for that discussion. I want to move away from that wonderful discussion we've been having about the church and Mount Zion thinking, and move on to something. And I ask this question, notwithstanding your elaborate discussion, Mr. Solomon, on ONLE, regarding that L. Hello, am I being heard?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Regarding the L, you realize that after sometimes, of course, in normal circumstances, from what you've discussed, we usually skip, or our O and N are not to that standard. But the problem, from my observation, usually comes with the L, the legalization or
Yes.
legalization of these policies, especially with our African governments. I'll speak, and I don't have actual facts here, but I'll speak from the perspective from where I hail from, that you'll have these beautiful policies, well crafted, well thought out, and all that, but then you'll face an uphill task with having these ideas implemented, because I would think that usually, I don't know whether it is the same thing across Africa, that most of these policies are funded by donors, by Western countries who have a lot of, yes, the traces of their input. I want to pick your thoughts, Mr. Solomon, on how we can go about influencing policies and working towards legalization of all this. And I ask this not expressing my doubts on what we are going to do and all that. I feel this is a major challenge that we have. We have governments that would ideally not, would in most cases not take on certain ideas, even if there is a empirical basis for why they would be taken on, and they would want to serve their own interests. And it poses a huge challenge after we have done the organization, we've worked on the normalization, and then the legalization becomes a problem. What do you think, sir?
Okay, my thing, I'll just share. Emmanuel, when he was starting, talked about force. And the reason why we call it the force of ideas and why people say that ideas rule the world is just for this reason. You see, because let's go back to the old NLE that you're talking about. First and foremost, 20-something years ago, the lifestyle in which a man married a man or kissed a man and all of that was abhorrent to most of the world. But we see that gently one country after the other is normalizing it and making it legal. You see, there is something academic to this. And that is one other pain and one other issue that I think we need to deal with. The church, in the main, does not understand the importance and how crucial philosophies and theories are. And so we disdain critical thinking for sometimes what we call faith, as is normally said. The Apostle Paul, who gave this prescription, when he said we are going to take philosophies, knew that that's the way to go about it. Once you have taken that thinking, and I'll give an example with music. In Nigeria, there's a lot of fraud going on. Just about any person in the world now knows what is called 419. 419 in Nigeria means chapter 4:19, which is in the criminal code, which is obtaining money by false pretense and all of that. Now, Nigeria has, I was reading in the papers today, private jets that the value comes to about $6-something billion. In a society where 68% is unemployed. Somebody will ask, and that's why we talked about organizing and finding out what the breach is, because it says that you shall be a restorer of the breach. Why is this so? There is a thought in Nigeria, and if you Google, you will find out there is something called Owonikoko. Owonikoko is a thinking that says money is the key, and money is the most important thing in life. All kinds of music is pushing out that philosophy and that theory. People are imbibing it. Somebody has a birthday party for their 1-year-old son. They will call a big musician. They will change money into new notes and begin to spray it. It's called spraying. That thinking, that theory, that philosophy has taken root in the minds of the populace. And so it is going to direct their behavior. So anybody now, if you come to Nigeria, you will find out that if you are going to get into a party, there are people who are selling new notes, mint. They will sell it and put a premium on it. So for example, if you are buying 3,000 shillings, they will give you new shillings and you will give the person back 3,500. So they make that spread 500 on it because it is new, because they want to spray it. That philosophy is responsible for that pervasive thinking in society. So the first thing to do is that philosophy that you have, push it, make it popular, push it through song and all of that. The gay agenda. Let's talk about politics. Pete Buttigieg, who is the Minister for Transportation, or sorry, Secretary for Transportation in America. We saw that when he was taking office, he was taking his oath of office, he made a statement. He said, I want to give thanks to my husband who supported me. All of this unpopular lifestyle 25 years ago has become so mainstream because somebody called Andrew Sullivan, who is a Yale, okay, and whether Princeton or so graduate. If you Google him, Andrew Sullivan, he wrote the seminal article, Here Comes the Groom, in replacement of that popular song that is sung at weddings, Here Comes the Bride. It is through the academia that the professors and all of that started pushing that lifestyle in the campuses, in the universities. And so it becomes something that was taught, and then students started lapping it up, and people started saying that they do not think. Like a friend of mine, his daughter just left for America, and the daughter called back that for the first 1.5 weeks in class, all they learned was pronouns. So when somebody can now be they, you now have something that is called they be. You had baby before, B-A-B-Y. Now you have T-H-E-Y-B-E. Somebody is of that gender now called baby. The academia pushed it. That is why what now becomes popular, because the president, when he comes in, politics is about representation. You want to take somebody from this constituency because you want to be seen as somebody who is a president for all. And then they push their own representative, and this is the person that we are submitting to be a minister in your cabinet. That is how it is done. That's why the Apostle Paul says that, and the Message translation, it will be nice if we go and study properly, critically, the Message translation of 2 Corinthians 10:3-6. It says, it is dog eat dog out there. The world does not fight fair, never has and never will. It says but we don't fight that way. We use our powerful God tools to smash this massively corrupt culture. And what is the God tool that we have? The thinking, the philosophy, and the theory. The church must embrace critical thinking and academics, which is the source. It is the river. It is what is taught that is the river for the eventual behavior. Government is then bound to listen because you are in the you have a critical mass. It is when you have this critical mass that the legislature is forced to receive your policy. That's what the advocacy should be about.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for that, Jackson. I hope your question have been answered. I see a comment here from Winfred. It says principles in the Bible work even outside God. I'm not sure. They are like laws. My thoughts of developed world are that are losing and lost morals is that they use principles but ignore God. The church in Africa is just going through a real mindset transformation. I think that's true. Okay, I think that was just a comment. Any further questions? I don't see. The rest are comments. Someone maybe just your final thoughts. I think you've given us a lot to think about, which is always great to see. Just your final thoughts on how we can make this work. I think you've given us some practical ways of engaging. Just what are you kind of thinking around how we should be engaging? Specifically, Joshua shared as part of their pathway, the stakeholder engagement, including Ecclesia. How should we be engaging these partners that we want to work with to make this work for us?
From the presentation, I would like to give my own understanding and what I think. I think that the majority of the work, because like the professor said, people are doing all kinds of things every day. It is what the seed of that thing is that determines it. So I think that where the work is the preparation to by research, okay, having an understanding, then having a perception and clarity of what the real problem is, because there's something that's called the fundamental attribution error. What the fundamental attribution error is, or what it does, is that if the problem is not well isolated and articulated for what it is, then we'll be treating symptoms. And it never works when we treat symptoms. And as we know, the principle is the axe is laid to the root, not the axe is laid to the branches, because it will grow again if you don't cut it from the root. So it's to painstakingly, prayerfully, and perceptively identify what the Christ-minded principles are. For example, if you want to go to, if you want for a minister of agriculture, okay, to come up with food security, for example, research will be able to tell us what stuff like the quality of the soil. Is the soil even appropriate in the first instance? What are the ways in which the farmers, I'm just giving examples. What are the ways in which the farmers, okay, are farming? Is the soil tired? Is it overworked? Has the land been mulched, for example? Have you done everything that is required to be done so that the yield that is coming from there is going to be adequate as we want? You see, the study in the Bible presents solutions to just about everything. It is to seek out what these principles are, because these are the ones that never fail. That is the meaning of no word that has come out of my mouth will fall to the ground. That's where I think that the work is. You see, when we talk about, Isaiah talks about oaks of righteousness, we should never be too much in a hurry to find answers. That's what I want to say. And I want to say something about business, one language that we speak. It may look innocuous, but I think in my own personal experience and from what I have seen, there is something we talk about quick wins and low-hanging fruit. I understand it. But the point of it is that we should know the difference between that and haste. That's something that I will say. Articulate the problem properly. Get professional help. That's, yes, professional help. But that professional help must be something that is coming from the principles that direct the practice as Christ would approve of. I can talk a lot about media, about film and all that, because that's the area in which I play as an advertising practitioner. So I've been able to articulate that the breach is the product design gap. So it is for all of the professionals in their different competencies to come up with, because sometimes it looks as if this thing is too much delayed or whatever. But no, articulate what the principle is that will make anything that is faulty in your profession and practice. And how would Christ have that be? When you have that, then you can now go ahead and begin to push it. That is the one that can never fail. Because as the professor talked about the world, COP26 has shown us that the world is now looking back for God. That's when they begin to call the Daniels and the Josephs, because their ways will have failed them. That's when yours becomes the one that is unique.
Okay, one last question here, Solomon. I know I'd ask you to wrap up, but there's a last question for you. Is that the Jews are leading thought leaders in the world and great businessmen and women. Do they have Mount Zion thinking or mind of Christ? I think an answer.
If you look at what does Israel mean? Israel means a prince with God.
Yeah.
That is the name that was given to Jacob when he found out that he was wrestling with his maker. And God knocked his hip bone out of joint. And he said that you are going to have to bless me. And God made the statement and said, yes, that's my job description. I bless people, but I will not bless you in the context of you being Jacob, a deceiver. So the quintessential, the essence of Israel, as we can see, is about creativity. Creativity and design will always give you superiority, because when the Jews go to sleep, when the Israelites go to sleep, they have been able to design the Iron Dome in such a way that when missiles are coming in from all of the surrounding enemies, automatically, their missile destroyers are activated and they go to destroy their missiles in the sky. That is creativity. That is an example of being creative. That's an example of subduing the earth. You see, the fact that somebody says they are Christian doesn't mean that that's what makes them have the mind of Christ. God is creator. And whether a person says they are Christian or they are not Christian, if they use the principles of Christ, they will attain solutions. That is the reason why Israel teaches the world agriculture today. Because they've been able to take their water, which is essentially salt water. They drink water because they design solutions for desalinization. In Dubai, you will find out that flowers and beds and all of those kinds of things are growing on the roadside. They are using the principle of drip technology that was designed by the Israelis. So the call to the Christian is about creativity and innovation, because man is made in the image and likeness of the Creator. So if you are going to resemble the Creator, you are going to determine that you will create solutions. I think this will help us to understand that the fact that a person say they are Christian doesn't mean that solutions will come if they do not go to God. What you have is that you have the advantage, because you have the inspiration of Christ to show you deep and secret things that you know not of. That is the whole purpose of prayer. That's why we are talking about the 3 P's. The pain that you have, that is your empathy with the situation. You go into prayer, Jeremiah 33:3, call on me, I'll show you deep and secret things that you do not know of. I don't know if That speaks to it. We cannot escape creativity and solution creation. That's what Christ would want. And if an unbeliever does it, then the unbeliever has been able to solve the problem. He may not go to heaven, but the point is that he has found solutions to the issues that plague him here on this earth, which is the mandate for the church. And the world should come to the church for that. So that's why Isaiah says that the people are going to say in chapter 2 from verse 2, they are going to say, come, let's go to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways and show us how we're made, because we are made in his image and likeness.
Yeah.
We will not weaponize our pharmaceutical products. We will not weaponize whatever solution we have. We are going to beat our weapons of warfare into plowshares. So rather than causing death, it will create life. That's what now makes us unique, and that's what makes us Christian.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Solomon. We've had a great evening with you. I think you have given us a good input to shape our thinking into the position paper and some of the actions that we want to take. You have really added a lot of flesh to the discussion with the paper that we presented. Thank you, Joshua, for positioning the thought. I'm sure you've gathered a lot, which was the objective for this evening, to gather as much wisdom as we can to add to the paper. So when we commit that we'll take this and add to what we have and shape it more appropriately so that can have influence and impact. But thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. The number of hours that you've spent to us. You're a great friend of Inspire. Every time you come, you inspire us to take it even to the next level. We really appreciate that, and thank you for creating time to come to us. I'll just thank
you so very much, and well done for the good work. The Lord bless his work in your hands.